Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting preview for this week's Valspar Championship. Gonna break down the betting and DFS side of things, the golf course, give you an idea for the types of players that I'm looking at for some of my exposure this week. We'll take a look at the Copperhead Innisbrook course, some of my modeling and key stats, and then afterwards, gonna go through some of my top end plays, middle end of the board, and of course some of those diamonds in the rough that you're looking for to give you guys an idea of how I'm attacking this slate, and also to get your research process started. So a lot to get into here, some outrights, some DFS plays that I'm really looking forward to deploying this week, and some top 10 and top 20 bets that I think you might want to consider yourselves as well. So a lot to get into. Let's start it off with a look at the golf course in my modeling for this week. The Copperhead course is a stern test, and kind of like the API, it's got some gnarly rough out there. It's a solid driving test, and though it's maybe not as difficult from a firmness factor or just in general how slopey it can be at the API, it's still in the top 10 of the most difficult tracks on tour. So last year he had to score an average over par in all 4 rounds, and a lot of that was because of the added length of the rough. They went from 3 inches to 3.75 last year, and here in 2024 they're keeping that trend going. So the Copperhead course had become slightly easier over there since 2000. Since the 2020 range, it got even easier as the technology has developed. But now that they've added that rough, you've seen more teeth to this golf course. So, it's far different from the days when Tiger Woods was roaming the streets of Tampa. And now you've got yourself a big boy golf course where our modeling last year, right, we tried to adjust for that change. But now that we have a whole year's worth of data, we kind of know what to expect from this new setup. And what it gives us is even more emphasis on the ball striking at a course that had already been a ball striker's paradise. If you look at the 2010s, the 2020s with winners, it's guys like Paul Casey winning back-to-back, just ball striker after ball striker up there year in, year out. And though you've had maybe some mid-tier winners here, you don't really have anyone that's like way outside the box, right? It's all guys that, are perennial guys, even like Adam Hadwin who has a win here, like a Russell Knox, for example. Guys that have been around for a really long time and are established tour pros. So this is a course where you're looking for those premium sort of players, and it doesn't always breed somebody from like 50 to 1 and lower winning, but usually between something like 50 to 150 to 1. So this is a golf course that's great for the outright betting because of that, and of course for the DFS side where we kind of know who to attack. So in terms of our modeling, it is heavy on the 2 ball striking categories, in particular with the iron play, extra emphasis on the long irons. During my course preview, which of course guys is already posted on my YouTube for this week, if you take a look at Data Golf in the approach profile here, a majority of players are hitting more long irons. So that's something that you can kind of boost if you're going out there and creating a model yourself. Off the tee, driving accuracy has historically always been important around the Copperhead course, but now that they took that length, beefing it up just a little bit, I do think that driving accuracy matters. Something I want to add a little caveat to is that it's not all just about that driving accuracy. The other way to get out of it would be to maybe not miss it super far offline, but to be really strong, right? Like a Cam Young, the higher ball speed players that are in this field, because they're not going to have nearly as much trouble getting it out of that rough. So whether it's driving distance, whether it's club head speed, there are a few ways that you can measure that. The Bryson approach out there at Winged Foot is becoming a little bit more doable at this golf course, that bomb and gouge strategy, just because of the makeup of the golf course now. Around the green has always been important here. A lot of your past champions, your top 5 finishers, have been some standouts in that category. And if you take a look at the leaderboard from last year, you had quite a few poppers in that category that finished top 5. Most notably to me would have been Tommy Fleetwood, who was getting up and down from everywhere. Jordan Spieth too, in true Spieth fashion, gained like 3-4 strokes around the green himself. At this course, it's not super easy to get up and down. The bunkers are real tough in particular, but Jordan Spieth last year managed to go I think it was 11 for 13 in sand saves, which is how he got like those 3-4 shots gained. So if you're an elite around the green player, Patrick Reed historically had a ton of success around this golf course. It's a track where you can actually go out there and accomplish that. So surprisingly shows up in the model because it matters a whole lot. No, not so much from the fantasy scoring perspective, but especially for outrights, top end positioning, you see that with some of your finishers here. Par 5 scoring, though it's a par 71, you do have 4 par 5s, so that's something I'm looking at. You also have 5 par 3s, so it's a little bit of a unique setup from that perspective, and all of them are 175 yards plus. So if you're looking at specific hole length stuff, you can look from 175 to 200, and then a bunch of them, I think it's 3 of the 5 or even 4 out of the 5, are going to be in that 200 to 225 yard range for a majority of the rounds. Putting is de-emphasized this week. It's something I'm looking at hardly at all, honestly, out there in my modeling. We do have POA overseeded greens. We can't completely ignore the putting because we've had guys like Sam Burns go back-to-back here. I mean, Taylor Moore gained like 4 or 5 strokes putting himself last year. Just kind of something that Taylor Moore does out there on the PGA Tour. So not something we can completely ignore, but it is far from an important stat for me this week. In fact, even around the green, right, it's like I'm looking at it here at number 3, but it's only about 15% weighting in my modeling. So a majority of it, as you can tell, right, has to lie on these top 2 categories, which is why I'm looking for all of those ball strikers this week. And added little bonus, right, either be really accurate with the driver or be somebody that has that elite tier distance, elite tier club speed to get out of that rough. Bogey avoidance at a difficult track is always something I look at, especially for the outrights, blows placement bets. And then from the comp course perspective, we've got API that has similar type of rough to what we're going to get this week. Quail Hollow Club, another course with real wooded fairways, right? It's, little tight driving corridors out there with real healthy rough and real fast undulating greens like we're going to get this week. And then PGA National, a little bit of a different test, right? It doesn't have that wooded aspect to it, but another difficult Florida track with similar enough agronomy. It's a different type of greens, different type of rough and all that, but a Florida type of golf course with water in play, and one that's a stern test itself. So my main 2 comps would be the API and Wells Fargo. You could throw in Cognizant for a little bit if you wanted to, but this is a ball strikers affair and one that we kind of know what to expect after all the years of data here. And now to go through our DFS and betting exposure. So we're going to start up top, talk through some of our top plays, where I'm going to be avoiding the 10K range, at least for the sake of this video. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to have exposure up there. In fact, there are at least 2 players in the 10K range that I can guarantee you I'm getting exposure to. But for the sake of the value on the outright market and what I think is going to be some leverage for some of your large field GPPs, this 9K range is going to get a special amount of attention this week. In fact, I'm probably going to have a lot of balanced type of builds as well, where I do avoid the 10K range in my GPP lineup. So that's why we're going to format it this way. Also, one of my value plays I want to take is a little bit more expensive than what I want to go with. And it's just a weird week for lineup construction, right? I kind of like that balanced build a little bit, and we'll talk about why as we talk through these players. So let's start with Cameron Young here at $9,600, who I think with the longer rough is a perfect course fit for here at the Valspar Championship. So a few reasons for that. First off, disclaimer, he has not played here before, so his course history, all of that is completely up in the air. But I think on paper, this might be one of the better course fits on all the PGA Tour. So a few reasons for that. First off, right, that elite tier clubhead speed, that elite tier driving game at times that gets it done around these heavily wooded tracks. You like that. You like the fact that the iron play of late has been unbelievable for Cam, where he is gaining 1.03 strokes per round. By far the best iron play of anyone in this field. His off the tee play has actually been a little bit off. You can see just slightly above average right there, gaining just 7/100ths of a stroke per round. But what you like about Cam Young is that he's had a few pop putting performances of late. And, if you just look at the last 12 measured rounds, you're not all that impressed with him losing 0.44 strokes per round. But what if I told you he's had 2 performances of over 3 shots gained putting out of his last 6 starts? And if he does that, combines it with, one of those elite tier ball striking weeks, which we've become accustomed to seeing with Cam Young at this point, well, it might turn into a win. And, we've seen him have some top-end finishes before. I think for DFS, he's an even better play than an outright bet because there are questions about his ability to close, right? He's been so close so many times before, but has yet to go out there and break through for the win. But at DFS, we don't have to worry about that, right? You don't necessarily need a 9K play player to go out there and win the golf tournament to get there. One of those top 5 finishes, which he's had so many times before, would be perfectly enough in that format. So I still took him at 25 to 1. Again, maybe it's a little bit of a sucker bet because he hasn't done it before. I totally understand that criticism, but I love the course fit here, and anytime I can find a player that's a sneaky good course fit, I'm going to be a huge buyer. So a few reasons to, maybe have a little bit of hope. So if we zoom out on Cam Young, you can see that elite tier iron play remains, right? Still gaining 0.61 strokes per round, but he is normally an elite tier driver, right? Normally gains well over a third of a stroke per round in that category. And if the 2 stat categories that matter by far the most here, this is a golf course, by the way, where your winners normally have like the lowest feet made of putts like on the PGA Tour, like year in and year out. Somebody like Cameron Young, like it's perfectly set up for him, right? He's normally not the best short game player, right? Normally he's all about that ball striking. And, if we happen to catch him on a week where he goes out there, he gains like those 3-4 shots gained putting, we're going to be set up for a really good week there. So I think there's some potential there. I've said this story before. I've bet this guy just numerous times over the last few years. And a lot of times when he's gone out there and finished in second place. So he's been really good for DFS over that stretch. Again, not so good over there from the outright perspective. Maybe a better top 5 bet than an outright bet. Probably something I will consider doing by the end of the week. But for now, taking him out there with that outright at 25 to 1. And in DFS, I do think he's going to get some attention. I think he'll have some ownership in large field GPPs, but I'm not sure he's going to be overly chalky. The main reason for that, this 10K range is always going to get its exposure. Brian Harman coming off the near win, right, second place, is I think going to get some deserving attention there too. But, you have guys down here like Tony Finau at $9,300, who I think is going to get plenty of eyes, well deserved, right? As you can see, he's going to be in the play that we talk about here next, where Cameron Young's going to be in that like 15-16% range. So that's just my early inkling over here on a Monday evening. But at $9,600 is more than a fair enough price tag, and I think has got a shot to go out there and potentially, contend for a win out here. Next up, we've got Tony Finau at $9,300, right? Just alluded to taking him here. I've got him at 22.5 to 1, which, believe it or not, was the best available line, at least out of the main books out there in the industry. And what I like about Tony Finau is a lot of what we said about Cameron Young, right? Cam Young, always known for the ball striking. If you're looking for ball striking here in 2024, well, Tony Finau is one of the best players in this field, right? Kind of like a Cam Young, is gaining a ton of strokes with the irons. Also doing a pretty good job off the tee as well. If we zoom in on his last 12 rounds, you can see a lot of that remains, right? Tee to green gaining, mostly gaining out there with that iron play, where he's gaining 0.86 strokes per round. But what I really like about Tony Finau, and we talked him up as a core play last week, he just hardly made the cut, didn't really get that much done, but he gained strokes with the putter at TPC Sawgrass, which is amazing. He's not done that for a long time. And the week before that, he marginally gained. So this last week, I think it was over 1.2 strokes he gained to the field. Week before that, it was like 0.9 strokes over the entire event. So he's getting it working in the right direction. It's been heating up over the last few weeks. And again, the ball striking numbers this year, last 24 rounds have been excellent, right? Tee to green in general has, been there for Tony Finau. Gaining well over a stroke per round over those 3. If he somehow flips this putter, which he did last year, right? He went through a real cold stretch, and then all of a sudden he got it heated up, and then went out there and continued that momentum and won golf tournaments. It could be that same kind of thing again. And, in the past, it had been a meme to go out there and bet Tony Finau until it wasn't, right? Until he proved that he can go out there and start to close golf tournaments. Cameron Young feels the same way, right? When he gets that going, he's going to have that same type of thing. So maybe it is Cam Young that goes out there and breaks that this week. But Tony Finau right now, as somebody who's, a proven winner out here in the PGA Tour, I love at 9,300 and I love at 22.5 to 1. So it's not going to be a very popular pick because, these two don't have the course history, right? Cam Young, no starts over the last 5 years. Tony Finau's only start was a missed cut here. A lot of people are going to like Jordan, right? right? Myself included. I'm a huge Jordan fan, but they like that third place last year. JT, Sam Burns have ridiculous course history, so people are going to flock to these sort of players. And if they're going to try and take two of them in a lineup, I mean, even Xander, right? He's got pretty decent course history. If you take a look at his finishes, I feel like there's going to be so many people trying to jam two of those guys into lineups that maybe we do get slightly lower ownership on a Cam Young, a Tony Finau. So these are guys that I think are really good values, especially at DFS down here in the 9K range. And I really wouldn't mind starting Cam Young, Tony Finau, right? That gives you a ton of salary to work with, especially because the salaries go the whole way down to $5,000 this week. Not that you have to go the whole way down there, right? But you can take legitimate players down here in the 6K range or even top end of the fives. To where you can play pretty much whoever you want, right? You can just stack a lot of this 8K range and build lineups that you feel really comfortable with. So there are some stands down here that I'm going to get well over the field on. I'm talking 40-45% exposure myself, and Cam Young, Tony Finau are prime candidates for that. Next up, so this is not an outright play that I've put out. This one is just a top 10 for Keith Mitchell at plus 450. Also a DFS play that I really like this week. And if you saw my video preview over there on Bet the Number going through what to expect from this golf course, you saw that Keith Mitchell was just showing up time and time again. He's gaining a bunch of strokes off the tee. He's gaining a bunch of strokes on approach of late. And he's also up there in terms of driving accuracy and in terms of green and regulation percentage, where he's one of the best players on tour here in 2024. So if we take a look at the last 24 rounds, you'll see that his ball striking stuff is ridiculous. I mean, the off the tee is next level at 0.77 strokes per round. What separates Keith Mitchell from every other driver in the world, and honestly, I don't think there's anyone that really matches up to him, for my money, is the best driver in all of golf, is he's got elite tier distance. You know that from his stature. Guy is just built. But on top of that, he's one of the most accurate drivers in the world. I know that from a lot of the prop content I do, going over there betting his over on fairways all the time. He is just next level when it comes to the off the tee play. It's why he's played well at the Wells Fargo. It's why he plays well at other really tough driving tests. And now that they've lengthened up the rough, his driving is going to be such an asset out there. I could just see him going out there hitting 12 fairways around, hitting it, the 320, 330 that he hits it, and boat racing the field at this sort of golf course. So I didn't take him outright. I've considered it. I think he was 40-1 at Hard Rock. I wish he was 50-1. He's out there on a few other books. At 50-1, I would be a buyer for sure. So if you happen to have that number, I'm jealous. I would do it myself if I was able to. But $8,900 at DFS, he is the perfect type of play for me this week. Modeling loves him, number 3 in my long-term fit. Total model ranking, number 7 in the field. So a value from that perspective at number 11 in pricing. And in general, I think might not get the ownership he deserves, right? The modeling, the shots gained metrics are going to put some people on Keith Mitchell this week. But what I think keeps the ownership down is the price tag, right? $8,900. You got Minwoo there. You've got Nick Taylor on the heater. Then you've got this elite tier of players, right? That is just better, right? If you go up there and spend $400, $500 more, I'm hoping maybe it's a little bit of wishful thinking. It might be. We'll have to see when it comes to Wednesday. But I'm thinking that he's going to be 16% ownership. That's, Tony Finau too, I think is going to be in that same kind of range. Same thing with Cam Young. So it's not like these guys are going to be low-owned plays by any means, but they're going to be low-owned enough to where if I take them in 35 to 45% of my lineups, then I'm going to have well over the field, right? 2.5, 3x leverage on those 3 players. Which is kind of what I'm looking for my exposure. So Keith Mitchell, again, plus 450s for a top 10 was something that I went out there and was buyer on because he doesn't have to have a ceiling week with the putter to get there, right? He's a decent putter. He's not a great putter out there on the PGA Tour. You can see on these POA overseeded greens is a slight gainer. Tony Finau, worth noting, is a gainer on the surface, which, compared to his putting of late is a lot better, and he's on the come up as of right now. I like that for him. Even Cam Young, right, only losing about a quarter of a stroke per round. That is slightly better than his 24-round baseline. So added little benefit to these 3 is they have that little bonus. And Keith Mitchell, you can see here, right, is a whole half a stroke better on the surface than his 24-round average. That seems like it's going to be extremely valuable this week. So Keith Mitchell, a play to potentially keep an eye on from even the outright perspective. And the DFS, I think, is worth quite a bit of investment too. Just to remind you guys, for access to everything that is blacked out on these spreadsheets, make sure to check out my Patreon page. There's a link down below in the description of the video, but on there you can download these sheets, of course, completely uncensored for my projections and modeling and everyone in the field. And it's not just the top end guys, or it's not just the players you really need to keep an eye on that I do the modeling for. It is literally everyone in the field. You've got, your recent form rankings on here. You can see exactly how everyone is playing, projected cut rate, projected fantasy points, which of course are extremely important when you're going out there and building lineups. Fantasy points for optimizing for large field GPPs. Projected cut rate is really good for some of those cash lineups that you're putting together. And of course, you have my projected ownership for GPPs, my player pool, so you can see exactly who I'm taking, and all the different metrics that I'm using for my analysis. So you've got, your recent form, event history, your shots gained metrics that I'm looking at, last 24, last 12 rounds, all put together to make your life easier. On there, of course, my model weightings, so you can go out there, try and replicate my model, to go out there and just use it for your own analysis. All of that is for your access on the Patreon page. So check it out down below. Definitely would recommend it for anyone just trying to save a little bit of time, right? I go out there, I put together a lot of stats, all the stuff that is actually important for every single week, that I go out there and make my decisions based off of, right? And if I can go out there, make my player pool as an experienced pro DFS player, then it's definitely all the information that you need. Obviously, probably even a little bit more than a lot of you need out there to go make your lineup. So it's all on there for you to access, and it's how you can get all the behind the scenes info. But now on to some of our value plays, which I really like the value plays this week. They're all really good course fits. They're all definitely guys that I think fit this style of golf. And there's no other person that's better to start with here than Aaron Rai at $8,500. Aaron Rai was built for this course, and he unfortunately has not played here before, so we haven't tested that theory yet. But if you're team course fit like I am out here, you're gonna have to love him at this course. So first off, I took him top 10 at plus 550, which I thought was more than fair enough value given the course fit that we see here, and of late has been striping it. I mean, low key has been going out there, a machine from tee to green over the last few months. Is gaining a third of a stroke per round with the off the tee play, approach play even better at 0.6 strokes per round. Take a look at the last 24, so zoom out a little bit, make sure it's not just a recent fluke. He's still gaining a quarter of a stroke per round, we should say, with the off the tee play, close to half a stroke per round with the approach play out there. Really solid stuff from Aaron Rai. If you take a look at the green and regulation and fairway percentage numbers in particular, he's top 5 in the field in both categories. So what that tells you is that he plays conservative golf, right? Goes out there, he plays to targets, he does not take on a lot of risk, and at difficult tracks, right, where there's going to be a huge premium on accuracy and not making mistakes, that is the type of course that favors his game. And, he won once over there in the DP World Tour, won the Scottish Open, in fact, one of their more difficult events on the schedule. I don't think it's a surprise that his tour win came at this type of track. Playing a little bit different, right? The Renaissance Club, not quite what we have over here, but you get some deep rough over there at the Renaissance Club. We've got some fairways that are hard to hit, some greens that are normally really firm. So a different test, right? Different part of the world completely, but I think that there are some parallels that you can make between the two tracks. So Aaron Rai, $8,500, I think brings some value from that perspective. And what I really like about it is that he doesn't have the course history, right? Because if he had course history, if he's gone out there, he has, a bunch of top 25 finishes over the last few years, he would be mega chalk this week. But because last week he went out there and burned a lot of people that took him as chalk, it was way higher than I expected. But there with just the T35 finish, I don't think he's going to be as popular as he should be. So just trying to take advantage of some of the psychology of a DFS player, of a fantasy player in general, right, that has been burned from the week before. And knowing that he is like the perfect course fit here, maybe the unknown of that course history keeps him at a more reasonable ownership number. Next up, you've got ourselves Akshay Bhatia, who I got it for a top 10 at plus 800, but did take outright out there at 100 to 1. Put out a little bit of a tweet earlier today as I was looking through the betting board and felt like my boy Akshay was being completely disrespected. Now, I play him a lot more than others. He's starting to become kind of like a Jordan Spieth for me, where I talk him up entirely too much. But he's got a very attractive game when it comes to winning golf tournaments and for having spike weeks in DFS. Kind of like in Aaron Rye, he hits a bunch of fairways. He's actually a very accurate driver. Kind of like a mini Keith Mitchell. He hits it a long way and he hits a lot of fairways. Now, he's a little bit more volatile, right? He's obviously got a lot more room to improve, a lot more potential long term because of how young he is at this stage. But he also is an extremely high green and regulation player. Last year on tour was a top 25 green guy for most of the year. Over here in 2024 has gotten off to a little bit of a slow start, right? So this is why we're getting the price tag on Akshay Bhatia, but he's still gaining from all three tee to green categories. It's just a slight loser with the putter. You zoom in a little bit more where he's had more of that rough stretch, and he's still gaining with the two ball striking categories. So I think a lot of people are going to look at this recent form, right, his finishes, and go, oh, how could you want to play him this week, right? Missed cut for an Akshay Bhatia. It has not been nearly as bad as it looks. A lot of cuts right on the number. This is not a player that gives up rather easily, and he still had a lot of spike rounds over that stretch. So he's a guy at $7,100 who I think is being slightly disrespected because of, people that are box score watching, right? Even the books, right? A lot of them don't do their proper deep dives into players, and Akshay feels like one of those spots. Historically, I like a player, right? I'm looking for a guy that's like long and accurate off the tee. He's got that going for him. The iron play is a little bit streaky. I think that's good, right, out there from like the outright perspective or for DFS, where we're looking for a pop performance. And he has missed the cut twice here. So this is the main issue that anyone would have with him, right? Is his 2 starts here, he's missed the cut. 4 years ago, he was a teen at that point, right? I don't know if we can really hold that against him. Last year's cut, sure, maybe not the best performance, but he's the type of guy I'll take a shot on here. Just, proven tour winner, obviously went out there, won the tour event last year, is a guy that in general I think is just going to get better and better as the year goes on, and is not going to be chalk, right? Because of those missed cuts, because of the missed cut here last year, he's going to be a relatively low-owned play in this range. So unlike the first 4 plays that we went through, this is going to be a true ownership pivot. And just because it's Akshay, right, people love the guy, they're going to play him pretty much every single week. He's still probably going to be like 5% owned, but he'll be a guy that you can easily get like 4 or 5x the field on if you throw him in a quarter of your lineup. So I'm going to be aggressive with it. I'm probably going to take him in about that 20-25% mark in my lineups, and which might end up like 6, maybe even 5x the field when it comes to that leverage. And now finally for our last play, somebody I took for a top 20 bet at plus 400 is Adam Svensson, who, if you're looking for form, run the other way. But kind of like Akshay, a lot of this is thrown off because he lost 15 strokes to the field at the API. A lot of that was because he just gave up out there on Friday, just completely threw away his entire round. I believe shot well into the 80s there. Out there on Friday afternoon. He's $6,600, and if you take a look at his finishes over the last year, you see the intrigue, right? It's just top 20 machine, right? That's why I went out there, took him for the top 20 bet, and also had a bunch of spike performances, right? He's a tour winner out here in tour, has a few second place finishes to his name, and I think the crazy part about this is, you look at the shots gained to go, this guy can't have been playing, well at all recently, right? Well, he's not that far removed from a top 10 at a signature event. If I told you that, would you even believe me out there? Now, yeah, it's been 4 of 5 missed cuts, right, over his last 5 starts, but he does have a top 10 finish at the Genesis of all places. So he's the type of player that goes out there, pops even in those sort of fields, and that kind of performance in this field could even take home a win, right? Maybe not a win, right? Probably more like a top 3, top 5 finish, but that's the kind of player that we're talking about. That's the kind of upside that we have with Adam Svensson. And anytime you take a shot on a player like this, right, unless it's just a pure ownership pivot for large field GPPs, you want to make sure the guy has a good course fit, right? Like if you're going to take a shot on somebody that just long-term fits a golf course, I'm fine with that, right? Even if you want to take him in more of your lineup. So for me, this is going to be like a 15 to maybe even 25% kind of play this week. Probably closer to 20 in reality is what I'm going to end up taking with Svensson, which might even be a whole 10x the field when it comes to his ownership. The reason why I'm doing it is because the golf courses Svensson plays well on are courses that are ball striking fast, right? If you take a look at his shots gained metrics, he's a really consistent gainer in all 3 tee to green categories. Really good long iron player. If you take a look at a lot of those metrics, that of course is the type of range that we're emphasizing this week in terms of your approach distribution. And $6,600 is, I actually think, maybe even a steep price for him because of just how bad the form has been. And that's why he's going to be relatively low owned, right? Like Lee Hodges has been playing surprisingly well. Ben Silverman, right? Guys like Andrew Novak with all those top 10 finishes. these are going to be the guys that are like 5 to 10% owned, right? That are actually getting attention here. Svensson, who's the best player of the bunch, by the way, like he's the only one who's, I mean, I guess Hodge is one. I mean, good for Hodge. He's also a tour winner, right? But in terms of like top 20 finishes, he has like by far, not even close, like by far the most amount of them of anyone in this range. If the best player is going to be one of the lower owned guys, then by all means, like go ahead and do that for large field GPPs. So that's the idea with Adam Svenny here, is you got to kind of just look past the 15 strokes that he lost at the API. And if you do that, it's really not all that bad. So if you take a look at the last 24 rounds, which are still completely thrown off by that horrible performance, I mean, they're not great, right? He's losing off the tee, he's losing around the green, but a lot of that is because of that 1 week performance. So in those 2 rounds, right, those 15 strokes are enough to take these from positives to negatives across the board. So if you go out there, do a little bit of math, you'll see he's a gainer from tee to green outside that golf tournament, which is the Adam Svensson that we know and love, right? And I know it's not his best stretch of form. He did go through a similar stretch last year and then turned it around with a few top 10 finishes. So he's not a very consistent golfer, but that's okay when we're playing large field GPPs, right? We're looking for that top end upside anyways, and he certainly has that aspect going for him. That is all I've got for this week's DFS and betting preview. Before you hopping out of here, go ahead, smash that like button for me, and also comment down below who you've got winning this golf tournament. If I had to narrow it down to just one of my plays, I'm going to go ahead and take Tony Finau, just assuming that he gets a little bit of putting momentum going. But go ahead, let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and let's go out there and have ourselves a week. Of course, as per usual, we'll have a little bit of prop content coming out tomorrow, our live stream Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time, where you can go out there, ask any questions that you have for this week, and overall, just getting ready to gear up and have ourselves a week like we had at the Players. Out there, of course, Showdown for rounds 2 through 4 were an absolute movie. Was asked for my lock all 3 days, and the lock came through like an absolute champ. So that worked out for Showdown. Just player pools in general were really good there. Props, we profited on all 4 slates. Our main slate stuff actually sucked, right? Because Scotty won. I faded him. That one didn't go well, but Showdown made up for that. And then we bet Scotty out there on Sunday, which might be the call of my career at this point. Him starting, 6 strokes off the lead to start the final round. I told you guys that he was like 100% going to win. I just had a really good gut feeling about it. Watching him just slap the ball around, shoot -4 on Saturday, I knew that if his neck felt better, that was the only real if that I had about it. If he woke up and his neck felt better, that he had like an 8-9 under par round in him. You could just see that based on how he was scoring without having his stuff. And honestly, that is about the scariest news that I could see for the PGA Tour. So obviously, as someone at the API Players, I am extremely biased. I've never seen golf like that before. I didn't see prime Tiger Woods. I was just a youngin out there at that point. I've never seen this before in a live action golf. So extremely impressed with Scotty. We'll see him at the majors. We'll talk him up there. There's a good chance I'm betting him at all the majors this year. But heck of a week of the Players. Let's keep it going out here for this week's Valspar Championship. If Spieth gets into contention, JT, I might be there out there Saturday, Sunday. So we'll have to see if that ends up happening. That would be an absolute blast again. But if not, gonna just sit back, enjoy the golf from home for a little bit, and guys, bring you guys all the normal content that we see here week to week. So stoked for it. Best of luck out there with your exposure. Again, smash the like button if you haven't already. Comment down below who you got winning, and subscribe so you don't miss any of that content to come.